Right now, somewhere near you, someone is going to sneeze. And without even thinking, someone else is going to say, "Bless you." You've probably said it 1,000 times. You've probably never once asked why. But the real answer is far stranger than a simple habit of politeness. Somewhere in the deep past, a sneeze wasn't just air escaping your nose. It was your soul trying to leave your body. Think about that for a second. Your soul trying to get out through your face.
To understand how humans arrived at this idea, you have to understand how the ancient mind worked. There was no germ theory, no concept of a virus irritating your nasal passages. There was only the body and whatever unseen force animated it. And that force had a habit of doing unpredictable things. It left during sleep, wandering through dreams. It left during death, permanently. And every so often, it seemed to leave in short, violent bursts. A sneeze looked exactly like that. A sudden expulsion, uncontrollable, almost involuntary, like something forcing its way out. So ancient cultures across the world, separated by oceans and centuries, arrived at eerily similar conclusions. In ancient Rome, a sneeze was treated as a sign worth responding to immediately. The Roman scholar Pliny the Elder documented the custom of saying a blessing after someone sneezed, treating it as a moment tied directly to a person's well-being. Romans didn't sneeze and move on. They paused. They acknowledged it. Because if you didn't, something might slip through the gap. In ancient Greece, the belief ran even deeper. A sneeze wasn't just a bodily accident. It was sometimes read as a divine message, a sign from the gods breaking briefly into the human body. Soldiers were said to treat a sneeze before battle as an omen, either a blessing to charge forward or a warning to hold back. Move across the world to parts of West and Central Africa, and you find similar caution. In many traditional Zulu and other Southern African belief systems, a sneeze was historically connected to the presence of ancestral spirits, sometimes interpreted as a sign that an ancestor was communicating through the living body. The response wasn't laughter, it was respect. And in Melanesia and parts of Polynesia, some traditional beliefs held that the soul lived loosely inside the body, tethered but never fully anchored, and a sneeze was one of the moments where the tether was tested. Different oceans, different gods, different languages. Same fear. Why would completely disconnected cultures land on the same idea? Because the sneeze itself is genuinely strange, even by modern standards. It's one of the only reflexes in your entire body that briefly shuts down almost everything else. For that split second, your eyes close involuntarily. Your heart rhythm shifts. Your entire upper body convulses in a burst of muscular effort you didn't consciously choose. To someone without an understanding of nerve pathways and irritant particles, that combination looks less like biology and more like possession. There's a reason it feels like your body isn't fully yours in that moment, because for a long time, humans didn't think it was. This is where the story usually gets flattened into a single sentence. People used to think sneezing let your soul out, and that's why we say bless you. But that skips the most interesting part. The belief didn't just fade quietly. It got picked up, formalized, and pushed into an entirely different kind of crisis. During the 6th century, Europe was gripped by a devastating plague. One of the visible symptoms in its early stages was violent, repeated sneezing. Historical tradition credits Pope Gregory the Great with urging people to say "God bless you" immediately after a sneeze, treating it as a plea for protection against death itself rather than mere politeness. In that context, the phrase wasn't a courtesy. It was closer to a prayer, whispered at the edge of a symptom that might be the first sign of the end. Suddenly, a soul escape myth and a real, terrifying disease were tangled together. The blessing stopped being folklore and became a public health reflex,
centuries before anyone understood what a pathogen even was. People had no idea what a virus was. They had no idea they were watching an early symptom of a specific illness. But they knew that when the sneezing started, people sometimes didn't survive what came next. So the response to a sneeze stopped being purely about a wandering soul and started being about survival itself, layered right on top of the older belief instead of replacing it. That's the twist most people never hear. The phrase you say automatically, the one that feels like nothing more than manners, was born at the intersection of superstition and genuine survival instinct, at a moment when both explanations happen to point toward the same reflex.
And it's not just Europe. Almost every culture that developed a verbal response to sneezing did so because the moment felt dangerous, not because it felt polite. In parts of the Islamic world, a sneeze is met with a specific phrase of gratitude to a higher power, followed by a response from anyone nearby, forming a small ritual exchange rooted in the idea that the body has just undergone something significant. In Japan, some older folk traditions held that a single sneeze meant someone was speaking well of you, while a second or third sneeze in a row meant the opposite, turning the sneeze into a kind of social weather vane. In parts of India, a sneeze right before starting a journey was sometimes treated as a bad omen, serious enough to pause the trip entirely, waiting a few minutes before setting off again. Every one of these traditions is doing the same underlying work, taking something the body does without permission and trying to explain it, contain it, and respond to it with the tools available at the time.
But here's the part that makes this more than just a quirky footnote. The soul escape idea wasn't limited to sneezing. It was part of a much bigger ancient framework, one where the boundary between inside you and outside you was treated as thin, unstable, and constantly at risk. Yawning carried similar suspicion in some traditions, with certain folk beliefs holding that an open mouth was an invitation for spirits to enter uninvited, which is part of why covering your mouth when you yawn became such a deeply ingrained habit rather than a simple courtesy. Hiccups, too, were sometimes explained not as a muscle spasm, but as a sign that your soul was being tugged at, prompting folk remedies less about physiology and more about spiritual reassurance. Notice the pattern. Ancient people weren't irrational. They were doing exactly what you do when something in your body behaves strangely and you don't have an explanation. They reached for the best model available. And in a world without microscopes, without an understanding of nerve reflexes, the most reasonable model wasn't biology. It was spirit. A body that convulses without permission needs a reason. And if science isn't there yet to offer one, something else will fill the space. This is worth sitting with for a moment. Every culture on record, no matter how isolated, developed some version of a soul, a life force, an animating presence that could leave and could be threatened. That's not a coincidence of superstition. That's a shared observation. Bodies stop working. Something is clearly missing when they do. The only question was what to call it and what to do when it seemed like that something was slipping. You don't believe your soul is escaping when you sneeze. Nobody around you thinks so either. But you still say it, or you still hear it said to you. The ritual outlived the belief that created it.
That happens more often than you'd think. Humans are remarkably good at keeping the behavior long after the original reasoning has quietly died out. You knock on wood without believing in tree spirits. You say Gesundheit or bless you without picturing a soul slipping through your teeth. The action survives. The myth underneath it fades into the background, invisible unless someone drags it back into the light. So the next time you sneeze and someone automatically responds without thinking, you're not just witnessing good manners. You're watching the fossil of an ancient fear, still moving, still alive in a sentence, thousands of years after the people who first spoke it were trying to keep something from escaping.